Alright, hello and welcome. This is CT5, and today we're going to be making a tier list for Triangle Strategy. Game's now on PC, but I played enough of it on Switch that I'm not gonna play it. I'm too poor, so... Anyways, alright, so as per usual, for any tier list for a single player game, it's generally not very useful. But they are damn fun to talk about, and that's why we're here anyways. So we're going to do something slightly different than the sort of traditional tier list that we see a lot nowadays. Quick spoilers, we're gonna have two tier lists. Two! So we've got these two axes here. We've got, oh, this is the wrong one. So we're gonna do something slightly different. So we've got these two axes here. On one hand, we have the more generally useful to context dependent. And then we've got the big brain to galaxy brain scale on the vertical axis. So, you know, where a character is will sort of tell you roughly, you know, how generally useful they are, and then how easy or hard to use they are, etc., etc. So we're going to start with the main character, Serenoa, and then we're going to go through all 30 characters in alphabetical order. So yes, there will be some spoilers if you have not played this game, yes, because we will be covering all the characters. All right. So starting off with Serenoa, our main boy. Where does he go? Bloop, goes around here. Somewhere around here. So he is going to be in basically every single match, every single story battle at least, so it's a damn good thing that he is both fairly easy to use and basically always useful. Early on, his signature skill, you know, Delaying Strike, will save your butt at all points in the game, and then later on, he'll get his big damage, Hawk's Eye, or Hawk's Dive, big damage, and of course if you can make use of the sort of signature mechanic in Triangle Strategy, the follow-up attack. He's a passive that boosts the follow-up attack damage. Great use of that. That's probably the hardest thing to use about him, is positioning him to get good value off of to get a lot of follow-up attacks in while keeping alive. But at the same time, you know, if you just, any sort of follow attack that involves Serenoa is going to be great. So you don't even have to necessarily like force him into that if you don't want to. So, you know, depending on playstyle and stuff, could float a bit, but I feel pretty comfortable having him right around there. It's a nice little benchmark. And yeah, that's the other thing about tier lists, like playstyle and stuff, and individual player disposition. That's going to affect our interpretation and how we use our characters, and also them working in a team, right? Like you'll probably notice at the end of it, like there's a lot of characters that are probably generally useful, but like there's some maps where the context dependent people will be better, or like having too much of like. There's going to be a lot of utility folks in this section because, surprise, utility folks are going to be generally useful. But too much of them, and suddenly you might not have a super functional, super well-functioning team. So these are all things we gotta keep in mind. That, again, complicates the discussion, complicates the tier list, but also potentially makes for fun discussion. All right, next is Anna, who is, to no surprise, generally useful, and Anna, probably one of the strongest characters in the game, like overall. Simply because of the fact that she can go invisible, which means she can, in theory, potentially solo like almost any single fight. Like if you get into a bad pinch, as long as Anna's alive, you can probably get out of it okay. And so hence, very generally useful. She's got really good mobility options too, which also contributes to that. And depending on how you use her, she could be further down the scale, because like the easiest way to use her is to just like attack, take cover, wait, attack, take cover, etc., etc., etc. If you want to use something, so that's the easiest way to use her, and if that's all you want to use her at, bump. But assuming you want to be slightly more active with her, then finding the right balance then moves her up a little bit. Here seems pretty reasonable. It's all fairly rough, but this seems appropriate for her. And she's slightly more complicated than Serenoa, just because since she gets 2 actions per turn, like a lot more flexibility. If you don't keep track of things well, like you might not get as much knowledge out of her. All right, who's next? And so let's see. Archibald is... Oh, here he is. Whoop! He's super easy to use. You basically, all you really need to do with him is just basic attack. So if you like basic attack heavy playstyles, whether in an MMO or a MOBA or whatever else, this is your guy. The reason he's context dependent is he's a slow, low mobility archer. In other words, He wants to be on maps where you're in a more defensive position and preferably with high ground. That's where he's perfect. If you have to move a lot, / you're on low ground, he gets much worse, hence why he's on the context dependent side. But he is very easy, you just point and click. Very easy to use, but what map you put him out on will affect how well he performs. All right, next, big spoiler time, big spoiler time, big spoiler time. So you're scared of spoilers, better look away. For everyone else, all right, Avlora, where does she go? Probably around here. Arguably, okay, so depending on stuff, we could argue that Avlora is really easy and simple to use because she's just big damage person. But a lot of the trickiness is that she's the type of unit who benefits from being she wants to be under half health and obviously alive. That's when she's at her best. So if you really want to play to that, then it gets tricky. Because then you have to be careful of like potential hard-hitting enemies and whatnot. But you could treat her as a regular unit and then she goes more down. And then she gets a lot easier to use. Like you could treat her as a normal unit and she'd be totally fine. But assuming we want to make you to take advantage of all her skills, because she's cool, then she gets a little bit harder because you are going to have to manage that that little health range. Next, good guy Benedict. Good guy Benedict. Where does Benedict go? Well, he's a utility person, generally useful, and whoop, he goes way up there. So I should point out that right now that when I say hard to use for Galaxy Brain up here, it's a combination of hard to use, hard to understand, or high skill ceiling. It'll sort of depend on each character. And Benedict is definitely a high skill ceiling character. His buffs, especially earlier, very hard to quantify and like sort of measure and feel how impactful they are. But trust me, they're good. They are impactful. Benedict is a strong character and his later abilities make him even better. He gets a big asterisk here because his weapon skill, Dragon Shield, suddenly, in some ways that's all you really need to use him for, in which case he goes, woo! But until then, he lives up here by himself. He is truly the Galaxy Brain of Triangle Strategy. And it's actually really cool that he's included in your sort of starting roster because I think better than almost any unit in the game, he teaches you timing for this game really, really well. Because to make good use of him, you have to have a good sense of when to use and spend your TP, which are like very, very, very important mechanics in the game. And if you try to use them all, if you think about it and you take the time to learn it, not only will you get better use out of Benedict, you'll get better use out of your whole team. It might really game gets real fun, potentially, if you're into that. But not everyone's into that, in which case, don't worry about him. But he is very cool. And again, quick note, this isn't actually we aren't necessarily actually talking about how strong or weak a character is right now, right? We're just looking in terms of these axes. Is it a character generally useful, or are they context dependent on the map and the ongoing situation? And then are they easy to use or hard to use? If you want to look at character strength, hang in there. That's going to be tier list number 2. Who's next? Cordelia! Oh shit, that's also spoilers. Spoilers! Okay, so Cordelia. Big asterisk here, as I do not have experience. I don't actually have experience playing her. But I've looked at her kit, I've seen friends use her. I had to think about it a lot. Think about how to use it and how it compares and contrasts with how my friends have used it, because I don't have the experience, right? And so real quick, I should mention, complete this game 4 times, all on hard mode, including a deathless run. I've seen all 4 endings. I'm well-versed in these types of games, I'd like to think. A good sense of what I'm talking about. And so I'm going to pretty confidently say that Cordelia lives right around here for a number of reasons. One, it's she's hard to understand. Her kit is really weird. And the reason she's on the context dependent side of things is because of rest and recover TP. She has to, if she doesn't move on her turn, she gets extra TP, which she absolutely needs to fuel her heal spells. Which then raises the question, well, holy shit, why not just use another healer, right? And that actually leads me to think that her real heal spells are actually probably from her buffs, Regen and Elude, which is an evasion buff. So if you completely dodge a hit, it's like healing, right? Like if you dodge a hit, then you don't need to be healed, hence it's kind of like healing. And alternatively, if you heal with Regen, it's passive. You potentially have Regen on for 4 turns. Regen, you heal 20% of your max HP. If like one person takes damage, then can like safely retreat and not get hit for a couple turns, that could be all the healing they actually really need. And so the big TP cost is heal and like healing Regen, like big heal spells you associate with Cordelia. I actually see those as an emergency usage. Making everything work about her, and also her helping hand thing is a really interesting thing too, because it's like she doesn't want to move much, but then she needs to move and somehow in a good position to be like near your team so they can get next to her for the passive heal. it's tough. She seems really hard to use, which is why I'm pretty comfortable putting her up here. And again, the mobility issues or her relying on not moving much does put her towards the context-dependent side. There's also the weird potential option where it's like she turn 1 region or elude, and then turn 2 use above and beyond on someone and use all that extra overflow, overheal HP to tank, and then like during that meantime, that's how she recovers the TP to do stuff. God, I don't know. She seems weird. She seems weird. And not nearly as flexible or as immediately obviously useful as the other healers, so we're gonna put her in the awkward corner. Also, I should mention that my first playthrough, the story characters I got in my first playthrough are Corentin and Milo. And Milo, however you say her name, carried me so hard such that, like, I'm biased because she reduced the need for healing a lot as well. So Cordelia just don't quite jive with me. Even though actually I think she might work really well for my playstyle. A very do-nothing kind of playstyle. Alright, so that was fun. Hey, Corentin's X. And where does he go? He's gonna be the poster child. He's gonna live right in the middle. He kind of strikes the balance of everything. So arguably he's generally useful because he's a mage and he provides pretty solid AoE damage and is actually a flexible suite of skills too, between Shield of Ice and every now and then random Wall of Ice, but mostly the emergency Shield of Ice. That said, what makes him potentially difficult to use and or context dependent, like a big part of his utility in addition to the AoE damage, is actually the ice tiles he leaves behind. This is what leans him towards the sort of context dependent side, because if you're advancing into the enemies and then Corentin's dropping ice, he's slowing you down, and then if you stand in the ice tiles, then it's a little debuff for you. It's awkward. That said, if you're defending a position, or if you're trying to run away while keeping enemies at bay, then the ice that he drops is absolutely fantastic. So you do have to manage that. And then in addition, so like all these things, it's like, in some ways, right, he's very easy to use, just point and click with his AoE. But in other ways, like you do have to sort of work around the ice he leaves behind. And so how well you manage that, in addition to his TP cost, especially before he gets TP on ice, that's going to influence these things. He has a lot of things pulling him in all directions such that I feel very comfortable leaving him right in the middle there. Okay, next, Decimal. Where does our fun little barrow boy go? Here? Right, for Decimal to get TP, he has to full weight in place. So again, on maps and battles where you need to move around, kind of awkward. So he's very much context dependent. And then how you actually want to use them. So some contexts he's actually very, very easy, i.e. if you're attacking uphill, height 5 plus blow everything up that way. That makes it very easy. But in other cases, what makes them hard is figuring out when to full weight, i.e. if you have 4 TP, do you still full weight or not? That's a hard call to make. Because if you're 4 TP, it feels like a huge waste to full weight, but sometimes it's the right move. And making that call is going to be something you probably don't have to, is not a call you have to make as often with like other characters. So I'm happy to nudge him here. There is an argument that he's pretty easy to use, just move him around, find the spell that hits the most people, but there is something to be said about waiting at the right time. And okay, that argument can apply to any mage, whatever. All right, next, Eridor. Where does Eridor go? Probably he lives around here. He deserves an asterisk as well, because with King's Shield definitely puts him down around here. But until then, he might actually be a bit closer up here-ish, depending on stuff. I didn't think I was going to do this, but he's context dependent. So, my general outlook on shield units in this game, especially they're just kind of not real units. They aren't an actual threat. They don't do anything. Eridor is a shield unit. He's slow, low mobility, dies to magic instantly. What's the fucking point of a tank? He's just gonna fucking die immediately. He doesn't actually do anything. And when I was playing, since I used him less, he was underleveled, so his provoke hit rate wasn't very good either. So I am arguably a little bit biased in this regard. It does not fit my playstyle well. But, depending on how you want to use him, but I think he is arguably easy, because you can just walk forward, provoke, hit someone every now and then, and hope he doesn't die. And like, that's kind of his job. That's probably how a lot of people use him, and that's all you need. Until you get King's Shield, and then you can do whatever the fuck you want. Because King's Shield solves his weakness. Now he doesn't die to magic. In the meantime, he'll live here. Low mobility hurts, and being slow hurts. If there aren't mages, right, he's really good, but that depends on there not being mages. So he can go here. Next, Izana, our delightful weather shaman, lightning mage person. Bloop. There's an argument she'd be easier to use because chances are she's just doing Spark and or Rite of Luck. You can do some potential fun stuff with other characters to get Rite of Thunderstorms going. It feels really hard to justify using the weather spells because they make other characters weaker, like Frederica and Roland, where the rain tiles happen from Rite of Rain is random, so you can't even reliably spread lightning. And unlike Narv, her wind isn't as good. But the sparks do a lot. It's like, that's cool, and Rite of Luck is kind of cool because the buffs are cool too. I don't know. I feel like she's context dependent because single target, while nice to have, if that's all you do, it doesn't quite do enough for me. There's only a few maps where it's like raining and you can reliably spread the lightning. So again, there is an argument she's probably easy to use if you just look at her as Spark and Rite of Luck. But I think fully taking advantage of using her whole thing, it's harder. Flanagan. Boop. I moved Eridor this way, I can give him a small nudge that way too. So I would say he's in the sort of hard to understand pile. If we want to make the most direct comparison between Flanagan and Eridor, I would say that Flanagan is more offensively oriented. Right? He has more mobility, which is actually pretty nice, and yeah, I will put him on the axis then. Because he can fly, and then you can use the aerial assault to go through things. His weapon skill is pretty huge, Rampart, and suddenly very interesting things can happen with Rampart, but that also still relies on you like positioning well and making good use of it. Hence like the context dependentness, because Rampart, he reduces damage allies next to him take. So it's sort of like, ideally you make like a 3 tile wide wall of characters and just sit there. If you're willing to sort of push slowly and make full use of Rampart and just sort of only advance when Flanagan advances, I'd say there's an argument for him being generally useful. That's why I'm keeping him on this middle axis right here. But I think he's a lot harder to use and understand compared to, say, Eridor, where Eridor, right, does what you expect a tank in like an MMO to do. To like very clearly, very obviously draw all of the aggro. Flanagan doesn't do that as well, right? He has to use Shield Bash, which is only one target. And yeah, Flanagan might have the same issues of dying to magic, but I don't know. I think it's very cool. I think it's a lot more interesting than Eridor. Who's next? Frederica, and she is boop boop. Feels about right. She's a mage who really only has one job. Like, when was the last time? Like, I don't think I've ever used Fire Eater. When was the last time I used Flame Shield? I've used Flame Shield like maybe 5 times. Okay, she gets an asterisk here too. This is down here when she has KO TP+. If she doesn't, she's like around here. Because TP management is very, very important, as with every mage, right? Have you ever, you know, as Frederica, early on in your triangle strategy career, turn 1 Scorch, turn 2 Scorch, turn 3, oh shit, she's doing nothing. Uh-oh, everyone's dying. Oh no. Turn 4 Scorched, I did it, but everyone's dead, right? So TP management and finding the right time to preferably hit multiple units with her spells. Keep her up there, and then once you get KO TP+, then she goes down here, because ideally you then set it up such that she kills a unit most rounds, or at least often enough to continuously maintain being able to cast a spell every round. Okay, next is Frederica's attendant mentor person, Gila. And healers, always good, very easy to use. What's really nice about Gila, she can cover all your bases. She has status removal, she has single target and AoE heal, and she has some offensive. She helps the team offensively with haste. And thank God for her for those in need passive, because otherwise this game would be really freaking hard. Alright, next, Giovanna. Probably, whoop, boop, 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 she's up here. The next Galaxy Brain after Benedict. And of course, probably the most context dependent, because literally that's all her abilities revolves around what type of terrain you're on, and life is hard for Giovanna. She's very cool. I really like, I'm not a fan of slow speed units generally, so I have this sort of bias against them, but the high move is cool, the high range is cool, the linear is really interesting, and you know, you can potentially hit some people that you otherwise can't from her high range linear attacks. But getting the terrain is really hard, so I think her and Corentin are like best buds in gameplay terms, because Corentin makes ice for Giovanna to stand on, who then makes more ice for Corentin to stand on for his TP, etc., etc. And then, you know, weapon skill and Thank goodness she has the weapon skill, which is really cool, but also really expensive. But life is hard for Giovanna. Life is hard for Giovanna. Right, moving on. Everyone's favorite grandma, Grandma. She's great. She's great. She's pretty easy to use. She's generally useful. Really nice mobility. And while it feels like she's probably just using the energy fist, the ranged melee attack most of the time, every now and then her taunt more accurate than Eridor's, and she has the mobility to sneak into good places to make it work. And then every now and then her 3D horizontal tile immobilized kick can randomly catch someone off guard. I don't want to rely on it because it's only 50% chance, but you know, every now and then it's funny. She's great. And personality-wise, love her. The Japanese voice actress did a fantastic job. And yeah, pretty straightforward to use. Evade tank kind of person, just be somewhat careful, but she's fun. She's a lot of fun. Next, we're about like halfway through. Okay, Sabra. Where did she go? She goes here. So she gets a bit of an asterisk here as well, because I think to make full use of her stuff, i.e. like follow-up attacks, the healing from follow-up attacks, and whatever else, you could push her up a little bit. But once you get her weapon skill Catapult, it's a lot easier, and if that's all you want to use her at, then, you know, she could be, like, down here. But there's still the issue of, like, moving around and timing. So I feel like here is a pretty reasonable spot for her. Early on, she's kind of squishy, and that can be hard for people to use. Like, you want to use her as a healer, but it's like she's only getting... Her heal costs 2 TP, you have to be very precise with your movement to get the bonus TP. I think she's pretty good. But especially early on, she's just going to be a lot harder to use. And like some of her later passives that she gets help her out a lot and make her more flexible. But definitely worth a spot. And definitely, like, there are certain maps where she is phenomenal. Okay, Huette. Boo. You're not a... Okay, this feels right. And I say that, okay, for Huette, obviously the mobility. After Anna, she's like the second most likely character to be able to solo a map, depending on the map. So there's an argument that, you know, she's on context dependent side because, you know, if there's a good spot for archers, she can get it. But her being able to fly around is really nice. Her status effect arrows are both bonkers, like especially the immobilizing arrow. But blind arrow early on is really, really helpful too. It's really hard to imagine her like not being good and not being useful. And yeah, fairly easy to use. Just move to a good spot and shoot the arrow. Boop. Jens. Good old Jens. Favorite blacksmith. Where does he go? He's very context dependent. So basically around the same spot as Zazana. So very context dependent because I see Jens as being very context dependent because the two things he really looks for are narrow corridors for his traps or big height differences for his ladders. If a map features both of those, insane value. If only one of those two, then, you know, you have to really make that work. Whichever one he excels at, really make it work, and then somehow find a way for him to be useful otherwise. And if you're not on a map that has either of those, not nearly as good. Because replacing a trap down, you want it to get sprung, you want it to get activated. So on a wide map, then it's like, and people can sort of freely move, then like, what's the point? And you have to work more for it. Small asterisk here in that he gets a lot easier once you have one TP spring trap. Because then you can just do it every turn and you can relax. Till then, and just overall probably for the context dependent, I would say it is a bit harder to use. But he can be a good way if you think about where to put traps. He can be a good way to think about movement and positioning of units. Next, Julio. Where does Julio go? Alright, he's a utility boy, so pretty generally useful, and I would say, okay, he gets a big asterisk as well, because the easiest way to use him, obviously, is just moment of truth, every turn, and especially once he gets the 1 TP, once you get the TP discount on that spell, literally do it every single turn. The reason I have him up here is for making full use of his kit, i.e., when do you not babysit one of the mages who need the TP all the time, and when do you have him go out and soak up a few hits and make use of TP barrier? What's the right time for Inheritor, which, depending on certain factors and combinations, can be really easy, but other times that could be a really interesting choice. He's probably one of my favorite design units, just overall in terms of like concepts and using the mechanics specific to triangle strategy. I think it's really, really, really cool, and I really like him for that reason. Even if I don't use him much, I think he's an awesome, awesome design. But I do think taking full advantage of his kit is probably a bit harder, because again, you can play him really easily and just use his one buff the whole time. But it's like, I feel like he has like so much more potential that he shouldn't just be relegated to that. We can do better. We can do better. He takes care of so much of us. We can do better. And right, he's the only other unit with KO TP plus as well, I'm pretty sure. Which is a very unique, potentially very powerful. Like, you can play him, like, he's surprisingly flexible. You can play him a couple different ways. Like, I think that's really cool. Moving on, Lionel. Okay, so I gotta say, I have very low experience with this guy as well. I know he's good. I recognize he's good. But it's probably easy to use. Right, so he gets another asterisk, because once you get Endless Speech, or as old school people might say, Mimic Daravon, it probably gets a lot easier. But until then, okay, so until he gets Endless Speech, I think his main standout trait, like until late game, right? Early on, his main standout trait is this 4-range Fury, which I believe has pretty high success rate. Feels kind of annoying. I initially was like very meh about it, because it's like, he's slow unit, 4-range, single target, what's the point? Oh, the point is, you can really easily Fury, say like a backline cleric or mage, spellcaster, or if you Fury someone in the front line, but then you make a wall of units in front of Lionel so they can't get to him, you're wasting a lot of their turns. So I think his game plan is actually very straightforward. I'd say it's on the easier side to use. I feel like his context depends. This might just be my bias. I don't like his character, so I have to point that out there. And like, there's an argument he's on the generally useful side, because those stats can be good, but slowness, like, is it worth only having someone do the Fury all the time? I'm not sure. I don't have enough experience with him to really know. Y'all can correct me. I think there's an argument that he's more on this side. But until I hear that argument, that's where y'all come in. He's gonna sit there. Okay, back to Spoiler Town. Maxwell is around here. So again, the really nice mobility and the options he gets from Traverse and whatnot is really nice. High jump, kind of a big deal. I feel like that's where he really shines. In the meantime, I think the tricky thing about him would be making use of Traverse. You could Traverse, hit, and run away, or and then slowly building up to 5 TP, because he has a lot of skills that make you want to use TP. Triple thrust for the big damage, Lance Hurl as an emergency kill, run through to hit multiple people, Traverse for movement, and hopefully to hit multiple people. So a lot of things that make him want to use TP, but he also really wants to build up to 5 TP for high jump, because that's the cool stuff. And it's a big AoE, and so big AoE hits always feel good. So that's where he's good, but hard to use the tension. That said, you can just stream as a normal frontliner, and thank goodness for his revive, and then suddenly gets very easy. I don't know, up to you. But there feels about right. Next, Medina. Okay, so Medina is around here as well. Boop. We could argue that it's context dependent, because if you're not careful, you can burn so much money as Medina, and she gets a very big asterisk, because once she gets TP Physic, very, very good. Until then, less so. And so she gets a really big asterisk. But as a healer, as a flexible healer at that, generally useful, straightforward to use. The hardest part might be on knowing when to hold back on items and or when to use fast-acting medication. So next, Milo. Still don't know how to say her name. All right, she's woo! She's really good. I think she's really good. Again, she carried my ass through this whole game once I got her. She also gets a bit of an asterisk because, so before Heartstealer, and especially before the Heartstealer upgrade, I think she's up around here. With Heartstealer, and especially with the Heartstealer upgrade, woo! Pretty straightforward, pretty easy to use. Huge mobility. Just so good. Can't say enough. So good. Okay, on to another very good character, Narv. So fun fact, a lot of the characters in this game are actually pretty darn good. And I think that's really cool. So Narf gets to go up here, gets to be this far over because of their flexibility. They got the damage, they got the heals if needed, the extra range to set up the other mages, or pierce defense to set up extra other mages, extra range to have a 4-panel wind spell to then sort of safely hit people, potentially turn around to set up for melee people. Very flexible, very cool. As with most characters who are flexible and provide a lot of options, a little bit weaker individually, but when used well in a team, very, very, very good. And so managing TP is especially crucial with Narv because you are so tempted to use spells all the time, which is why they aren't further down. But they are definitely very generally useful. Okay, we're getting there, we're getting there. A few more. Piccoletta. Piccoletta. Where's Piccoletta? Bloop. So he gets this far because high mobility, like high mobility tends to you on generally useful just because it's easier for you to move around, and moving around is very, very important for these types of games. The other big thing, she's on this side, is decoy. So once again, we have a big asterisk. If all you use her for is decoy, which is what I do, you put her right down here. You decoy, you walk around, you laugh, you wait, nothing matters. Making use of the other aspects of her kit probably makes her a little bit hard, right? She's kind of like Julio. Very easy and straightforward if you want, but there's probably a little bit more going on if you want it to. And I tend not to enjoy the consumable type characters, so some bias there. I haven't used her that much in that regard, but like, there is value there. All right, Quahog. Quahog can live up here. I would say this is another big asterisk and more of a high skill ceiling type thing, because there are very cool and powerful combos you can do that not everyone's going to think up of. I certainly didn't. I know some of them because a friend who was playing it looked up these combos and told me about it, and I was just like setting up for Izana's Rite of Thunderstorms, amongst other things. So the big asterisk, you can just use stop time as a give TP to everyone on the map. And that's all you want to use them for. And whereas like a haste bot and occasional movement shenanigans. Okay, so if only stop time / haste bot, he goes down here. If you want to consider his movement options with warped space and distorted space, then he's around here. If you just want to think of everything, it's like reverse space-time timing and shenanigans and stuff, or using stop time in a more efficient way than just TP for everyone, then he's probably further up. And so he'll live there. Yeah, it's a pretty comfortable spot for him. Roland! Roland, Roland, Roland. Where do you go? Where do you go? Oh, you're right here. Yeah, he's around here. Mainly because positioning with them is really important. I kind of see him like Anna. Where's Anna? So Anna's like a very like obviously ambush type person because she can literally go invisible and then out of nowhere surprise you. Roland ambushes you with his high movement, and he fulfills a very similar role of like potentially big burst damage. Or if you can make use of opportune attack, and there's the hint, opportune. You don't go in willy-nilly, you have to find the right time and spot for it. Swoop in with the high movement, opportune attack for free on the back, for auto crit, followed up with something else, maybe a double thrust, 4 dragons if you really want the kill, rush if you want to just move back to safety, or a regular attack just for fun, because that's always cool too. I think that's the hard part, the timing and the movement, and positioning well to make use of his opportune attack. Getting the free opportune attacks is often the last extra bit of damage you need to get a kill someone. It's really cool to get it. It's a very important part of his game plan. If you can make use of that well, he's awesome. But because you have to consider those things, he's not like super straightforward, easy to use, as some of the other characters higher up on the big brain scale. And I would say arguably he's a bit context dependent because he is movement based. He wants a bit of a wider map, preferably to move more freely around. Quentin slowing him down, for example, will make him sad. Other stuff, if there's a lot of mages, be careful because they're just going to zap his ass dead if they haven't killed Eridor already. But I don't run Eridor, so they're going to kill Roland, right? Like, you gotta be careful, a bit. Doing these a little bit context dependent. Especially as you fill out your team. Like, I'd say early game, he's more on this side. But I think as you fill out the team and you get more characters and you can develop more specialized teams or whatnot, then he starts to be a bit more context dependent. All right, Rudolph. So I did not get him until my second playthrough, and by then I had other people, so I do not have much experience with him either. I would say he's around here. He's also on the context dependent side because of his traps. Then again, he's an archer, so like he has range attacks, so like who cares? I don't have a lot of experience with Rudolph. Because when my friend first got this game, she went to Ace Frost and got Rudolph. I went Taizan and got Corentin. And every now and then we check in each other's games and be like, wow! And whenever I saw Rudolph, it's like, you can do what? But then I got him and it's like, I feel like his stats are a bit lower compared to the other archers. I don't remember. But I do think what's really cool about him, especially for someone you get early on, is that he teaches you the importance of waiting. Arguably Corentin does as well because, you know, mage TP management is interesting, is tough, can be hard for newer players. But with Rudolph, he very explicitly gives bonuses for like waiting in place and not moving. And I think that's pretty cool. Something worth exploring that like newer players might not instinctively want to do, but that can actually be very worth it. I think it's cool that someone that early teaches you that. All right, 2 more characters, the Fun Bandit family. We got Travis. So I recently got Travis. I don't have too much experience with them, but yeah, it's around there. Arguably, he fills up around the same spot. He can be a little bit lower. So Travis and Valora are like very similar, kind of. Frontline, they have the same kind of movement. They both have a 3-panel horizontal attack. They're both capable of like biggish damage. No. He's basically the same spot as Laura. Because Travis has some shenanigans with backwards toss. That's really cool. And he sort of has the utility from this impending strike, the AoE delayed strike. Whereas Avlora is literally just pure damage all the time. He has some sneaky stuff with the backwards toss for repositioning and the impending strike to help the team out. And also he's very much a playstyle person too. Like if you like having all units move together, he's a little less good because he has that on your guard passive where if no one's next to him, he gets a defense buff. So like he's surprisingly tanky between that and Steelback and Rearguard's Cloak, and then he just faces back towards the enemy, so if any melee people hit him, they barely do anything. Fun trick you can do on Eridor as well. So Travis ends up being this like a more offensive-oriented frontliner that can kind of like offensive-oriented frontliner that you can also sort of send off a little bit, somewhat on his own. Like you have a small like duo of like people sort of going off on their own doing stuff. Like he can be there, and that's pretty cool. All right, speaking of going off on your own, Trish. Between Act Twice and Leap and whatever else, she goes wherever the F she wants. And honestly, her having a elemental-based physical damage is actually in Fire is actually kind of a unique and cool thing that like literally no one else provides. Elemental physical-based damage. No one else in the game does that. No other playable character does that. So that in Act Twice is very unique, very cool. I had a lot of fun using her. I'd say given the mobility and stuff, definitely generally useful. And how much value you get out of her, she's hard to use because it's how much value you get off of Act Twice and how well you use that. It is her signature thing. It's a very signature thing of hers. And like on her own is because it's like she doesn't have as much accuracy as Archibald. I don't think as much strength either, you know, but like Act Twice you can do potentially really nasty things, i.e. double 2 follow-up attacks from like Anna or Serenoa, like that's devastating. Be able to hit 2 different potentially weakened targets, which is very much my playstyle thing. Since I emphasize speed, my people aren't hitting as hard. And so I'll often get people fairly low, and then Trish can potentially clean up 2 units in one turn, like that are far apart, right? Because she's got range, she's got the bow, and she can move in between the shots, like potentially very cool. I would say it is a playstyle thing. And a lot of flexibility between the Act Twice, the Leap for movement, all this stuff. And because of that, it's not hard to scale. All right, tier list number 1. Let's see how things shape up in a slightly different one. Let's see what happens when we change the axes. So we're keeping our generally useful context-dependent scale, but now, instead of the big brain to galaxy brain, we have the less strong to strong scale. And this is going to be in the context of the early game / your first playthrough. So let's see how things shape up. Alright, starting with Serenoa. Generally useful, strong. I think I forgot to write him down. Alright, well, Serenoa's pretty good. And a very good. Ooh, sorry early game / first playthrough text. You're in the way. But Anna's up there. Anna deserves it. She's very good. Archibald, you sort of get him middle game-ish. And he's around where Jens is. Let's move Jens out of the way. Let's move some folks out of the way. of Laura. You're probably not getting your first playthrough. If you are, well done, congratulations. Guess I'll say she just goes up here. It's hard to imagine her not being good. People should be roughly around the same scale on the generally useful side of things. Next, I think it's Benedict's. Generally useful. He's probably not going to be as obviously strong, so I think he could live around here. But I do think he is still a very good unit. And Cordelia, just don't. So Cordelia's going down here because there's more of like an NA. Like don't go that path. And while we're talking about story characters, okay, if you want the true ending, / you don't mind playing the game a lot, then Milo can go way up here. Otherwise, if you don't want to do the true ending first, then she goes here. For the same reason Cordelia. It's like, you know, like it's late and like Cordelia's hard to use. Sorry, Cordelia, you're not gonna do it. All right, Crenton, you big AoE boy early on, you are good. Gonna move you aside, Flanagan. Yes, AoE damage early on, fantastic. All right, Decimal, you're probably not getting him your first playthrough. So same as Giovanna. And Quahog, you're probably not getting them your first playthrough. I mean, like, you could in theory grind effort, but it's realistically, I feel like normally, you're probably not getting them your first playthrough. Okay, Eridor, where does Eridor go? Yeah, Eridor can be like up here. And like early on, you don't have as many options. You might not be comfortable playing without a tank. All right, we can nudge him. Is he better than Benedict? No. Well, context dependent. I'll put him the same level. The slow units just don't work well with me, generally speaking. Izana, you stay where you are. Flanagan, people probably get you fairly late. Probably not gonna have Rampart. Don't even have Safe Haven. And you're less obviously good. If Flanagan's that low, Eridor has to be lower. That's just how it is. Frederick are good. Big AoE damage. Do be careful sometimes. Squishy. Sheila, welcome to way up here. Yep. So good. Only healer you actually need. Okay, Narv as a backup is really helpful. So my first playthrough, most of my healing, you know, to recover my mistakes. Gila, emergency sanctuary from Narv, occasional item, restore from Quietus. But Gila's mostly what you need. And again, in like subsequent playthroughs, my perspective is skewed because I had Milo. And once again, remember, this is in the context of the early game. I will reshuffle these around for like, assuming everyone has their full kit and potential unlocked. Okay? So hang in there. But I think for early game, this is worth including. Groma, you're probably getting Groma pretty late if you get her at all. I didn't get her till my second playthrough. But if you do get her, I can't see her not just, I think she's super solid and super fun. Okay, Wasabra, so if no catapult, hard to use. Without full kit, a bit hard to use. She probably goes down a bit. Light personality, but just hard to use. Huette, you are also... Yep, you and Anna carry the early game. You and Anna carry most of the game. For most people, probably. Jens, you are still context dependent, but you are pretty darn good on the right maps. Julio, yeah, that seems right. So like TP battery versus like potential clutch factor of now or act again, or randomly bulwark even. No, it feels right. That feels right. Lionel, oh my god. Do you even do anything? Yeah, you're around here. You're in with the other slow boys. And again, this is like before Endless Whispers, right? So he basically only has the ruffle feathers. That's enough. That's enough. Is it? All right, we're gonna assume that they all roughly occupy the same spot. Maxwell, you're getting Maxwell pretty late, but Maxwell's still pretty good. Maxwell, Medina. All right, so this is Medina before TP Physic, early game, before TP Physic. Like, she can't survive as her main healer. Like, her job is to be the offensive-oriented thing by giving TP to everyone. Without TP Physic, you can't. Gila better. Okay, Milo. Assuming most people get one go for the true ending on like their second playthrough, don't pick the choice that gives you Milo, because then you'll have to do it again. Kind of unfortunate, but again, if you are willing to take the L or go for the golden ending, gold rune on your first playthrough, way up here. Narv, where'd that boy go? Boop. Flexibility is fantastic. It's, again, like, flexibility is fantastic. Teaches you to like wait and manage your TP well, so that's an important skill that'll help you through the rest of the game. Yeah, can't complain. Picoletta. So I did not use Picoletta much early game. I did not realize how good Decoy was, but if I did, since Decoy's all you really need, she can be up here. Up in this little corner here. Totally fine. Quahog, you're probably not getting your first playthrough. Roland. Early on, you don't have as many choices. And yes, he is strong. Strong as Frederica? No, but as strong as... Yeah. Maybe that means Frederica should be up here. Okay, Rudolph. So again, little experience, but my friend had a fan blast using him. So he goes like kind of comparable, like, you know, ranged, good damage, tricky stuff going on. It's comparable. It's a nice trade-off. They teach you different things. I love it. Travis, you're getting Travis late. But, you know, just, yeah, kind of like a Laura. Trish, probably a little bit more useful. And, okay. Boop. So this is the my early game tier list. And, okay, hang on. If Medina's that far down, Izana can go down a bit. And, yeah. It's really hard for me to call characters weak in this game, because they all have their purpose, right? Even the context-dependent people, there are maps where they shine tremendously on. And I've had a good time using all these characters in my playthroughs. And some of this will depend on your playstyle and team dynamics, map dynamics, whatever else. And because we can field so many units on any given battle, it's really hard to say, just, like, obviously point to one unit and be like, you're weak. Like, just rubs me the wrong way. But okay, so this is early game. Let's see how it changes when people have their full kit, full potential unlocked. All right, time skip, because, you know, it's been going on for a while. This is about how I'd put it. With all the characters, their late game, full potential. Again, it's very hard for me to say that any unit is weak in this game, for all the reasons I said earlier. And we got these big clumps going on. There's a clump here. Those four are probably some of the best in the game. Nice clump here. Little clump here. Stuff like this. The combination of portraits being big and just hard to evaluate. The relativeness, like, arguably, there's probably more. There should probably be a bigger spread of stuff than there is, but. So I guess, yeah, I imagine this is more spread out for if I was really willing to consider Izana and Giovanna weak. And Izana might, oh, feels gross, but she might actually be underneath. She might be getting into less strong territory. I think Giovanna's cool. But it's like such a complicated ball. So like one thing I was potentially mentioning is that like we can argue. So like I'm gonna highlight these people for a moment. Uh-oh, sorry, Cordelia. What do these 7 people all have in common? What are these 7? They're like frontliners. And they're on this nice little spectrum too. Varying from like full offense, full defense, slightly more offensive but defensive. Pretty standard unit, but low revive. It's like a more mobile version. Utility boy, because if you need, he can play tank, or can even randomly hang back, or he can poke with Hawk's Life, can randomly hang back for Under Conviction's banner. Evade and disruption, or just pokes, random disrupt, right? Like, depending on the map and the context and your team and whatever else, they could all sort of do similar-ish things to different degrees. And of course, everyone's going to inevitably try to use Roland as one, and no, he's not. We talked about this earlier. He's an ambushy person. But if you want to use him as that, like, right, you can just sort of run and then rush backwards, and like, that's okay. Not my favorite way to spend his TP, but like, serviceable. It works as a poke, you know. But yeah, these 7 that I picked out, you know, they sort of work on a spectrum, and they don't quite fill each other's roles, but very broadly speaking, you can all treat them as a frontliner, and then from there, you know, based on the map and situation, from there make full use of their abilities, or pick the right one for the situation, rather, right? Some combination of that. So, yeah, God, and yeah, they just end up being this ball in the middle there, because it's like they all feel pretty good. Like, I'd be happy to take most of them in any given fight. And there's like slow boy camp over here. It's like, what's going on there? And is Frederica actually as high as I think she is? But like, giving like Krenton's really good. Like Krenton's Glacial Moon is phenomenal, really. Both in terms of it's nice damage, allows him to get nice slows. It's big AOE, catch a lot of people are slow, more easily, reliably slow down enemy units. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. Those are my thoughts. This is my funny little tier list for triangle strategy. I hope that was fun. Do let me know your thoughts. And I will see y'all next... Oh. I'll see y'all next time. Take care.